Hey everyone, it's Mr. Drake. We are going to continue our talk about Reconstruction. If you're one of my students, we've talked about the various plans for Reconstruction, Lincoln's plan, Johnson's plan, Congress's plan, and we sort of left off with the end of Johnson's impeachment trial in 1868. This video is going to be primarily about Southern resistance to Reconstruction and ways in which they attempted to undermine the Republicans' effort to impose their system of Reconstruction on the newly readmitted Confederate states. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. First, a little bit of a review and just laying the groundwork for the conflict that came. As we said in class, again, if you're one of mine, most Southern states were readmitted under Johnson's plan, where general amnesty or forgiveness, a pardon, however you want to put it, was given for all but just the very tippy top Confederate leaders. Even Alexander Stephens, the vice president of the Confederacy, was back in Congress by 1866. The problem was that only one of these states eventually would ratify the 14th Amendment, which granted citizenship to all former slaves and anyone born within the United States. So Congress, over Johnson's veto, passes the Military Reconstruction Act, which makes the South, in essence, an occupied territory, divides it up into 5 districts, each district with its own general in charge. This leads to the Reconstruction era governments, primarily Republican-led, being protected by military force from being thrown out by Democratic mobs or what have you. And this is going to breed a lot of resentment and hatred. The whites in the South, the former Confederates, feel disenfranchised. They see their former slaves, beginning to hold office, being protected by who they saw as, sort of northern interlopers. So they're obviously going to be very angry, and that's going to lay the groundwork for a lot of more violent resistance later on. Republican governments were mostly coalitions in the South. You have African Americans who are newly enfranchised with their right to vote, protected by the military and by the Constitution eventually, in the form of the 15th Amendment. You also have scalawags. Those are Southern Republicans, people who lived in the South, white Southerners who were Union sympathizers during and after the war. And then you also have carpetbaggers, who are Northerners who moved into the South to involve themselves in business or politics once the war was over. Now, some carpetbaggers meant well. They came down to help educate blacks or help get them on their feet, for instance. But then there was the negative image of the carpetbagger that is sort of what became ingrained in Southern whites' minds. The vengeful Yankee who moved south to exploit the Southerners, to buy up plantation land for ridiculously cheap and then try to turn a profit later, that kind of thing. They're called carpetbaggers because of the cloth luggage that was popular at the time, and they were seen as sort of moving around from opportunity to opportunity, so that's where they get the name. Blacks do get elected to office during this time in fairly sizable numbers, maybe not proportional to their population in these southern states. For instance, in South Carolina, over half population's black, but not over half the elected representatives were. But you do have black office holders at the local level, at the state level, and even in Congress. Hiram Revels is the first African-American U.S. Senator appointed to a Senate seat in Mississippi in 1870. He actually held the Senate seat once held by Jefferson Davis. Little twinge of irony there, I guess you could say. From 1866 on, pretty much every election that was held in the South was a very violent affair, with Southern whites doing all they could to keep blacks and their Republican allies from voting, from exercising their political rights, and from maintaining any kind of control on the government at all. As Republicans and African Americans gain more and more influence in government and get elected to more and more offices, Southern white Democrats get angrier and angrier. They believe the Republican governments to be illegitimate. They believe military reconstruction to be tyrannical. They believe that blacks do not have the right to hold political office, and there was this, perception, real or imagined, depending on where you were, that the Republican governments were being incredibly vengeful towards Southern whites and towards the Democrats, and putting African Americans into office, these former slaves who could barely read. And in some cases that was the case, that was true, but a lot of African American members of Congress were teachers, preachers, fairly well educated. A lot of them were from the North and moved south after the war, that kind of thing. But the resistance really, really ramps up as of the late 1860s, and you begin to see vigilante military-like organizations pop up in the South. Organizations like the Red Shirts in the Carolinas and the White League in Louisiana, and of course, most notably, the Ku Klux Klan, which was referred to by many people as the military arm of the Democratic Party in the South. They murdered carpetbaggers. They murdered blacks who were trying to vote. They murdered anyone who was trying to protect African Americans' rights to vote, and they were very, very intimidating. It was a secret organization, so there were no official rosters or anything like that. So they were essentially able to do this for a while with impunity. Grant, who was president as of the 1870s and is much more sympathetic to the Reconstruction, the radical Republican Reconstruction vision than Johnson was, certainly, passed a couple of bills, the Force Act in 1870 and the Ku Klux Klan Act in 1871, which essentially suspended habeas corpus in those areas, and they went in and they arrested Klan members and threw them in jail, and fairly effectively shut down the Ku Klux Klan, although small pockets of resistance continued to exist throughout the South through the end of Reconstruction in 1877. If you're one of my students, the next time we meet, we're going to be talking about the end of Reconstruction, both the causes of the end and what the effects of the end of Reconstruction were. The questions I want you to think about going forward in advance of our next meeting are, what did cause Reconstruction to fall apart? You need to look through your reading and try to get a good grasp on that, political causes, social causes, economic causes, all of that. What came out of Reconstruction that could be considered good? We could be talking about, social effects, economic impacts, things that, maybe advanced things for African Americans or did make things better for them. And we're going to talk about why Reconstruction is considered such a failure. It universally is regarded as a failure, but why? The reasons people consider it to be a failure are myriad. So that'll do it for now. Make sure you're keeping up with your reading, and as always, feel free to ask if you have any questions. Cheers.